Welcome everyone. We're going to get started now. My name is Carla Rentschler. I'm the Product Marketing Specialist for Global Forest Watch, and today we're hosting a webinar about how to hold a training about our newest mobile application called Forest Watcher. And also talking to you today, we have Rachel Peterson, Liz Cole, Jessica Webb, and Michaela Weiss. So just a couple of points before we get started. We're going to hold a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to type any questions you have into the GoToWebinar chat or questions panel. And this webinar is also being recorded, so you can find it afterwards on the Global Forest Watch YouTube channel. Now I'll pass it off to Rachel to give a quick intro on Forest Watcher.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining this webinar. As Carla mentioned, my name is Rachel Peterson, and I'm going to give a brief overview of Forest Watcher and also Global Forest Watch. I'm going to assume that most of the people on this webinar have a cursory understanding of what Global Forest Watch is, but I will do a brief overview regardless. So hopefully, as most of you know, Global Forest Watch is an online forest monitoring and alert system that we launched in 2014. And it allows people real-time access to information about what's happening in forests around the world. And we do this by leveraging a few recent advancements in technology. Firstly, there are a number of satellites now circling the Earth, taking pictures of it every single day. And using this valuable information, we can analyze it with artificial intelligence and cloud computing to automatically detect where changes are happening in the world's forests. And this gives us an unprecedented picture of how forests are changing around the world. After we process that information from satellites, we display it on an interactive map. So looking at this picture here, this is the interactive map at globalforestwatch.org, and what you're seeing is the first ever data set on global tree cover loss. And we update this data set together with the University of Maryland and Google every year since 2001, so you can see around the world how forests are changing. And ever since we launched Global Forest Watch, we've tried to innovate our forest monitoring systems to make them more timely and more precise. So when we launched Global Forest Watch, the most timely alerting system we had was updated every month. But what I'm showing you here is a new system called the GLAD alerts, and these are updated every week at a 30-meter resolution. So you can actually see where deforestation is taking place on a pretty regular basis. I'm just going to show this animation again. So this is an example of the GLAD alerts in part of Peru. And what you're seeing here is the growth of a logging road in the middle of a protected area buffer zone in the Peruvian Amazon. So clearly this information could be very useful if, say, you're an NGO who cares about where forests are being lost, or you're a government who wants to enhance your enforcement efforts and allocate resources to the most high priority areas. You can use these alerts to find out exactly where that is. But we don't just monitor forests from space. Global Forest Watch provides a number of other contextual data sets to help you get a better picture of what's happening. This includes data on, for example, the value of that forest, such as the above ground live woody biomass density or the carbon density of forests. It also includes data on land use, so who is legally responsible for managing that land or possibly even owning that land. Is there a forest concession, a mining concession, an oil palm concession, etc. And we have over 190 data sets of this nature that we have compiled through research partnerships with NGOs, and partnerships with governments to help you get more of a nuanced understanding of who potentially is causing the change and what might be the impact of the change on the ground. So Global Forest Watch, for the first time, we've created a really incredible database of information to show you exactly what's happening in the forests you care about. But we've realized since we launched that many of the people who are on the front lines of deforestation, such as indigenous communities or park rangers or scientists even, don't have access to internet or desktop computers and resources that they need to access the Global Forest Watch platform online. So for example, this is a picture of an indigenous community in the Peruvian Amazon, and they use the GLAD alerts to help inform areas where they do patrols and areas where they go to understand what's happening in their territory. But in order to access the GLAD alerts, they have to print these maps and then take them from the city to their village. So clearly this is not necessarily the most efficient way to get the data into the community, and it takes a lot of time and energy to do so. So this problem, the problem of people on the front lines not having access to the infrastructure they need to use Global Forest Watch, was really the motivation behind Forest Watcher. Forest Watcher is a mobile application that we designed to bring Global Forest Watch data into the hands of the people who need it most. It allows you to access information from Global Forest Watch even when you go offline in the field, and to collect your own information about what you're seeing on the ground, information that maybe we can't necessarily see from space. You're going to get a much more detailed overview of Forest Watcher and how to carry out these trainings, but I just wanted to highlight a few key features that you might want to tell your community about. So Forest Watcher, basically what it does is allow you to download onto your phone forest change data from Global Forest Watch, specifically those weekly deforestation alerts, as well as daily fire alerts for your area of interest. You can then use the app to navigate offline to those areas and then collect information such as GPS points, photos, and text that provide a little bit more information about what you're seeing on the ground. And you can do this all within the app. And then once you've collected that data, you can upload it to the cloud to analyze it, download it, put it on a map, and it provides a very seamless way for you to go to the field, collect information, and then review it all in one place. The app is open source. It is completely free to use, and it's also available in a number of languages. So right now it's available in English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and Indonesian. And you can access those languages in the app by turning your phone under the settings into that language. So if your phone is set in one of these languages, the app will automatically show up in that language. And then finally, the app is currently available for both Android and Apple devices, so you can find it in the Android Play Store or the iOS Store. We've actually been developing this app through a number of partnerships over the last year. So Forest Watcher has been iteratively tested by a number of groups on the ground who've provided us concrete feedback on ways to make it better for their use cases. So some of these groups who've been using the app include partnerships like with the Jane Goodall Institute, who's using it with forest rangers in the Uganda National Parks, COGDF, who's an independent monitor organization in ROC, an Amazon conservation team who is using the app to help indigenous communities in Colombia and Brazil better monitor and understand what's happening in their territories. So I say this to emphasize that the app was something that was really created in partnership with real users on the ground, and we hope that what we've released to the public represents a tool that is widely available and useful to groups like the ones who have tested it before. So now that we've made it publicly available, we're hoping to get it into the hands of conservation NGOs, forest managers and rangers, law enforcement officials, local communities and indigenous peoples, as well as scientists. And we really hope that those of you who join this webinar today can play a key role in telling your networks about Forest Watcher and training them in Forest Watcher and helping spread the word about how this tool might be useful for forest conservation. So I'll kind of wrap up my piece here by giving a high-level overview of some of the key use cases that we think Forest Watcher could be valuable for. So firstly, in our testing with our partners over the last year, we've seen a lot of use of Forest Watcher to help determine priorities for patrol and enforcement, particularly for protected areas managers who have limited resources, limited time, and they want to understand the most high priority areas in a park to go investigate and focus their enforcement efforts. Forest Watcher can help them identify hotspots of change within their park and help them design their patrol routes around those areas. And then they can also collect information for reports within the app itself. Relatedly, we've seen a lot of interest in the app to help collect evidence on the ground to inform formal legal complaints. So if there's some sort of potentially illegal activity occurring, users can actually use the app to collect evidence, whether that is photos, GPS points, or text that they can include in a legal complaint about that potentially illegal activity. We haven't used the app as much for this purpose, but we do think that there is applicability of the app for researchers in the field. If those researchers, for example, want to validate data from satellites, or if they want to, say, collect survey information about that particular landscape, even conduct wildlife surveys, The app is very flexible and allows you to design a report structure that means you can collect whatever data you need from the field. So we do think that if researchers are looking for a simple data collection app, this can be a really useful tool. And finally, if your group is interested in conserving a particular landscape or managing a particular forest, Forest Watcher can be very helpful to help you survey threats in the area and inform your conservation or community planning and action. So with that, I will pass it off to Liz Cole, who's going to give you a much more detailed overview of the app and how it works.
Great, thank you, Rachel. So before I go ahead and dive into this, for those of you who have attended our other webinar, I'm not going to go into quite as much detail as I did there, and if you were unable to attend, you can find that on our YouTube channel. And so that's the Global Forest Watch page, and the link is titled Introduction to Forest Watcher. So you'll be able to find that there and view that in more detail, as well as some of our tutorial materials, which we'll talk about more later. So when you first open up the app, you'll be prompted with 3 login options. This is just important to emphasize because if you connect your app with one email address, you want to be sure to use the same email address in the desktop version of the app. This allows for communication between the mobile app and the desktop version and will just allow you to access more customizability in the desktop version. And this must be linked to a My GFW account, and you can create one of those very simply by logging into globalforestwatch.org. And there's a little icon of a person, and you can use that to log in to an account. So when you first open up the app, once you're logged in, you'll be prompted to create an area of interest, and this will be your screen for creating that. And so the whole idea of this is that the app is created around monitoring an area of interest. So area of interest is a term that we've used. It can just be the area that you want to monitor, that maybe you own a piece of land or you work in a protected area and you monitor a specific portion of that land. Whatever it may be, you can customize your area that you want to keep track of. You can customize this area by turning on different alert features. So as Rachel mentioned, we have our GLAD alert system, and you can download different time periods. So we have different periods, so a month, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. This is useful because oftentimes users aren't just looking at the last week of alerts, but they want to look at a bigger time period to see how the land has changed over time. So you have access to that in the app, as well as you can choose to download the VEERS alerts, which is our fire alert system from NASA, which is a daily alerting system, and you can download that up to a week period. So once you're in the app, you'll have your home screen, and from there you can actually select to download the areas of interest offline. And so as you'll see, you'll have that little check mark pop up in place of the download button. Once you've downloaded an area, that's just notifying you that it's successfully downloaded. And then once you are disconnected from internet and you come back online, and if new alerts have been added, you can click the refresh button, which will update the information that you've downloaded. So that's that little circle over here. So once you dive into your area of interest, you'll see a screen that looks like this potentially. So these are my GLAD alerts in the area of interest that I drew. And you can go ahead and zoom in on those. Or apply contextual layers. So there are 3 layers that are built into the app. You have protected areas, tree cover loss for 2014 and 2015, all of which are pulled from the Global Forest Watch platform. So if you want to find out more information about these layers, you can go ahead and visit globalforestwatch.org. And these are just context. They provide more information about your area. So if you want to understand how much tree cover has been lost over the last few years, you can turn on the tree cover loss alerts for these different time periods. this we found is useful because GLAD alerts are not yet available in every country, but some have found that they can still investigate alerts and have gained a lot of insight into what's happening in their area just by using these annual data sets. So as I mentioned, when you zoom in on your alerts, you'll start to get closer and you'll start to see individual pixels. These are the pixels that you can choose to investigate further if you're focused on exploring these tree cover alerts. So once you get in really close, you'll actually see a group of alerts or individual pixels. You can either select one alert or you can select a group of alerts. And the idea behind this is that you might visit a single alert that you want to report on, and it's, a smaller clearing, but then you might also come upon a bigger clearing, and rather than create 3 reports for these 3 pixels, which is just one clearing, you can create a report for a single area. And I'll just emphasize as well, once you click on a point in the top bar, it will show you the coordinates for that point, and then it will also in the bottom corner show you your position in coordinates and how far away you are. So of course I was taking these photos from DC, and this was in Peru, so I was quite far away, but as you get closer, hopefully your distance won't be so far. You can also report on any point on the map. So as Rachel mentioned, we see this being an interesting tool for scientists or data collectors in general. It's not just about reporting on deforestation alerts. It's also about exploring your area, reporting on your area, taking notes about what you find. And so this is our standard reporting template. This is the one that automatically comes with your phone when you download the app. And as you can see, it's very specific to deforestation. We tried to keep it general in the sense that, anyone could use this in the context of deforestation monitoring. But there is option to customize. You can take notes in the bottom field and store your picture as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can actually change the questions and build an entirely different report template. So once you save your report, you'll have these different options. So if you're offline, if you save a report that you haven't finished by clicking this bookmark in the top right corner, it will go ahead and store under drafts. If you are offline, then it will save under completed, and it will be available to upload when you're next online. And then uploaded reports will either be pushed to the server when you're on data, but it will prompt you first and ask if you want to upload, or if you're on Wi-Fi, it will automatically upload your reports. And so you're probably wondering where your uploaded reports go. That brings us to the desktop version of the application. So the desktop version is something you can access from a desktop computer. You have to have a desktop computer and Wi-Fi, obviously, to connect to it. So I want to emphasize that the mobile version of the app can be used completely on its own. The desktop version just allows you further customization. And so here you can create areas of interest. It's a little bit different of a template, but again, fairly simple, and I talked about this in more detail in our other webinar. And then you can view all reports. Either people from your team have submitted, and I'll explain the team function a little bit more, but you can view your reports or team members' reports, and you can actually download those answers and take them offline in a CSV format. And then you can create your own template. So from here, you could create a report about whatever you are interested in monitoring in your area. And you could assign this to specific areas, so you can create different reports for different areas. There's a lot of customizability in this function. You can also add custom contextual layers. So as I mentioned, you have these 3 layers that are automatically included in the mobile app when you download it. And we have a few contextual layers from the Global Forest Watch website that you can also simply click and add them to your device, and then turn them on and you can use them. Or you can also add custom layers, which there's more detail on the website about how to do that. But these can be layers that will provide you more context. So for example, one of our partners was really interested in adding their own layer information about local street roads and rivers and data that we don't have access to, but they already have, and it would provide them a lot of context when going out on patrols. And so from here, you can also create a team, which I briefly mentioned. You can add users to your team, and then you can manage what they see on their mobile device. So you can create an area of interest on the desktop version of the application, and you can send it to a team member's mobile device. And so you can do that by adding a team member through the screen, through the edit, and you have to use their My GFW account. If a user does not have one, you can also go ahead and create them one, but this allows, again, the phone to connect to the desktop version. Great, so I'll go ahead. That's a really brief overview of the app. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to my colleague, Michaela.
So you have a good overview now of the app and what we're trying to do. So my colleague Jessica and I are going to talk a little bit more about how to actually do a training and what might be some of the problems that you encounter when you are conducting one. Both of us, actually several of us in the room, have actually done trainings throughout the world. And so, just drawing on our own experiences, and I hope that in the question and answer section as well, that you'll be able to, ask us a little bit more about those and kind of the problems or challenges that we ran into. So just to start, I'll go over how we have structured trainings in the past that seem to work pretty well. So what we realized when we were first starting these trainings is, we come in, we have this great tool that we want to share, but we actually found that there's a lot of background work that, a lot of background material that you have to explain first. And so what we realized is that kind of the first step is just a basic explanation of what satellite monitoring is. Obviously, this is going to depend on the capacity of the people that you're working with, but in context when we were working with communities or local landholders, often they didn't even know, that we could monitor forests from space. And so I think explaining kind of how this system works, how we get the information, and then also, if there are some limitations associated with that, such as cloud cover. So just making sure that those things are clear before you even start looking at the app. So along with that, just the basic concepts associated with satellite-based monitoring, but then also the particular aspects of the GLAD alerts and the fire alerts. And Carla will share some resources at the end of the webinar, how you can explain that and some materials that we already have created. Second, I think it's really important to make sure that the groups that you're working with understand how the app fits into their existing work and the needs that they have. So part of this that we found is even before that, figuring out if there is a need for this kind of monitoring in this community or for this group. And in many of the cases, the groups that we're working with, we've identified because they do have those needs or they're already starting to work along those lines, but very clearly articulating to them how the app can change their workflows and hopefully, make their lives easier. Third, we think it's important to do a hands-on demo and set up the app, ideally, in a situation with internet. So, there's plenty of room for getting accounts figured out and downloading the alerts and playing around with the app while still in an internet setting and really getting a feel for it. And then after that's done, doing a field test. So we found that the field test is a really important piece of this, not only for using the app, but also for better understanding the data. And in many cases, you can show someone a pink pixel on the map, but it really takes being there in the field and seeing the deforestation that aligns perfectly with the alert to really understand what you're seeing. So then, ideally doing this to an area that you already know about, or I guess is not too difficult to reach would be the ideal for this. And then finally, after the field test, being able to actually use the app in an operational way. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Jessica to talk more about some of the pitfalls and common problems that we've seen.
Thanks, Michaela. So yes, from our various experiences with piloting and testing the app, like throughout development, we encountered, of course, as is typical with any new app or technology product, some pitfalls, and with that also some learnings that we wanted to pass on to you and ways to address those in case you encounter them during your trainings. So first off, if many users that we're working with are aware that they're purchasing new equipment because they're not necessarily currently using mobile devices in their monitoring work. So one tip is to make sure that all of the devices are updated to the latest possible operating system beforehand, or even if you're using a device that you had in the past, the app will work better with the latest system possible. And if you have questions about the minimum requirements, we're happy to go through those or answer those later on. A second tip would be to, before you start with the training, to create some sample areas of interest, both on the desktop version and also on the mobile app. Maybe set up a sample team and set up any custom layers or other contextual layers that you want to import. So when demonstrating the app and introducing it to the people that you're working with for the training, it's helpful to be able to show by example and already have some of that information and data populated so they can take a look at that. We also recommend that you build in extra time for users to set up MyGFW accounts beforehand. So the MyGFW login can be accessed through the main Global Forest Watch platform. And it's a fairly simple login process, a short form. Users can log in with Google, Twitter, or Facebook. But we recommend, while it's not required to use the Forest Watcher app, we recommend that users have a MyGFW account because that will increase the functionality that users have for the app, particularly in the setting up the Teams feature and some other features that the desktop offers. So I want to make sure to set up extra time for that. Of course, if users don't have an account currently with Google, Twitter, or Facebook, or they would rather set up a separate one that they just use for monitoring purposes, then we've in the past set up team accounts that can be accessed, or maybe one account per device. And so the easiest way to do that is likely to set up a dedicated Gmail account that can be used for testing. Also, as I'm sure many of you know, internet connectivity can be a challenge in many areas. Sometimes the internet goes out, sometimes the power goes out. Some of these things, of course, are beyond our control, but when possible, if you know that you're in a location where internet might not be very reliable, at least for the initial training portion where you need internet connectivity, then you might want to think about purchasing a mobile hotspot or some way to be able to access the internet just to ensure that your training goes smoothly. And we also recommend that you think about a few options for field test sites. As Michaela mentioned, the ideal sites are ones that you either already know or perhaps are nearby. The point maybe isn't to go out and replicate use of the app in an actual setting that may be more remote, that the participants will eventually be monitoring, but just to go out and be able to work with the app, see how it works in the field. And so you might not want to spend a lot of time traveling back and forth to that particular area. So a good suggestion would be to go onto the Global Forest Watch main website beforehand and look at the alert data that's available nearby where you will be doing the training, and maybe come up with a couple options. It's nice to let the participants of the training be able to choose where they want to go, but it's helpful to have a couple ideas in mind ahead of time and have been thinking about the logistics of getting there. And finally, though the Forest Watcher app will indicate the distance, as Liz showed, between you and the alert, its primary function is not as a navigation tool. So it's helpful to have a backup way to navigate to the alert. So you could either load the alert coordinates into a GPS device, or if you have another app that works for you, or a website, if there's like a Google Maps or OpenStreetMap, with data that will help you navigate to the field. You also may want to consider, if you have the data set, importing contextual data into the app, such as like a road network or other key areas that will help with navigation, such as rivers or local landmarks, things that will help you be able to more easily navigate to the alert once you're out in the field. And just a couple other points for troubleshooting that you may, hopefully will not, but may come across as you're using the app. One may be that you can't see your location. So when you're looking at the mobile device screen, it's not picking up a satellite signal. So the first step would be to make sure that location services are turned on for your mobile device. And if that doesn't work, if you're inside, you may not be receiving an adequate satellite signal. So that might suggest that you would go outside to see if it works then. And then also some devices have better GPS capability than others. So you might want to read about your device's capability. If you're thinking about investing in a new device, choose one that has more accurate GPS device. And then finally, you can try recalibrating your device by holding it horizontal to the ground and moving it in a circular motion or a figure 8 that can help with the phone to pick up the GPS signal. Another issue that you could encounter is that there's an error message saying that your area of interest is too big. We created a maximum area of interest size for Forest Watcher to be 1,500 square kilometers. That's because with areas of interest that are too large, it takes a really long time to be able to download the data for that area. It's just also a very large area to work with. So just keep that in mind when you're setting up your areas of interest. It's likely that the app will work better if you have a greater number of smaller areas of interest rather than a few large areas of interest, just because it will be easier to upload the data, and update the data, will take less memory in your device, which leads me into the third point. And if you encounter that your device runs out of memory, of course, you can try to create, again, smaller areas of interest. And then just make sure that as soon as you're able to reach internet connectivity, that you're uploading the reports and also all of the photos along with the report and clearing those from your device to free up some additional memory. If the app crashes, the solution is probably the same for any app. Try closing it and reopening it. If it still crashes, you could try to uninstall it and reinstall it. If it still crashes after that, then please, we would appreciate it if you could record the type of device that you're using, if possible, and also note what you were doing at the time that it crashed, and send an email to forestwatcher@wri.org. That email will also be on the last slide of this presentation, because that's very helpful to us, and we can work with the developers on addressing that. Other issues that came up with field testing, the keyboard on the device covers the form field, so it's not possible as you're typing to see what you're typing. You can try changing the text size in the setting of your device, and that should help to alleviate that problem. Another issue that you might encounter is that it's not safe to take a photo or fill out a form. If users are in the field and they come across people who are actively, illegally deforesting an area, it may not feel safe to pull out the phone and start snapping photos. So we created the form on the app to enable users to take a photo initially, like as the first screen, so that if it's safe, they can take a photo and then walk away and fill out the form later. Users can also take a photo, again, if it's safe, just with their camera app on their device, and then later when they're able to fill out the form, they can choose to upload a photo from their device's camera roll rather than needing to take it in the moment. If there are no alerts that are visible in your area, there could be a few different reasons for this. One, maybe your area is very large, in which case it's actually just taking quite a while to load. So you could either wait and be patient, or if it's taking a very long time and you have a weak internet connection, then perhaps you could try drawing a smaller area. You can also go on the Global Forest Watch platform to see if there is data available in your area of interest based on the either GLAD alerts or fires alerts. If there isn't any data on Global Forest Watch platform, then there isn't any data for that time period in your area. You could either try to change the time period that you're looking at, expand or slightly modify the area of interest that you're looking at, or you can also look at the annual GLAD tree cover loss data, which is available both on Global Forest Watch platform as well as in the app as one of the contextual layers. So this won't be as recent as the alert data, but it will give you an idea if there has been tree cover change in the past couple of years for that space. And this is also true of the fact that we don't have GLAD alerts available for every country. We're slowly rolling them out to different countries with the goal of having them available for the entire tropics by sometime next year. But if you are in a country where the data is not available, then you can use the annual data as a guide. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Carla, who will talk about the training materials and resources that are available to you.
Thanks, Jessica. So just a really quick overview. We have a how-to portal on the main Global Forest Watch platform that hosts all of the different tutorial materials for the whole suite of Global Forest Watch applications. But there's a section on the how-to portal specifically dedicated to Forest Watcher, and it includes online tutorial materials as well as a number of printed materials, because we recognize that if you're going out in the field and doing trainings with communities, you might not have internet access, and so you can print PDF versions. And the how-to portal is also available in 5 languages, so you can use it no matter where you're doing the trainings. And Michaela mentioned that one of the key aspects of doing a training is to give a little bit of background about the data sources and remote sensing. So we do have a number of slides that give some context about remote sensing and the different alert products that we have on Global Forest Watch, as well as some infographics and other kind of printed materials that you can share. So all of those materials will be available on the how-to portal. So you can look there and download those slide decks. And we also created a user guide specifically for Forest Watcher, which walks you through all of the different steps of using it with a couple of screenshots. And this is available in English at the moment, but it'll also be translated into French, Spanish, and Portuguese and Indonesian in the future. And along with this webinar, we've given 2 other webinars introducing Forest Watcher, and we will be doing an additional one in Indonesian We have one in Spanish, and there will be one in French as well. So if you're looking to see how we describe Forest Watcher in different languages, or just to get a more step-by-step overview, you can find all of those on the Global Forest Watch YouTube channel. And that sums up a quick overview of our tutorials. So we will now take questions, so feel free to type those into the questions box. And it looks like we have one already.
Yeah, so the first question is, should I use my desktop app to define areas of interest and then have the 5 Android apps, so I guess 5 people on his team, with the same email in order to have the same area of interest? So I think Jessica talked about this a little bit in what works well in training. That's definitely an option that would work, and all of the phones would have the same area of interest doing it that way. As I also briefly went through, you can assign areas of interest to different team members as long as they have email addresses that work on MyGFW. So you might have to create MyGFW accounts. You can also create, as Jessica mentioned, in some cases we created one Gmail address that we used for all testing partners, and then they had access to that in case they didn't already have a Gmail account. And then one more option would be that you actually create individual accounts. And the one reason that might be helpful is that the reports will show up on your desktop version of your app with the username that created them. If that's important information for you to know, then you would have to create separate accounts so that you could identify them, unless you found another workaround, such as having them add their name in the last question where it's open answer. But I think any of those options would work, so you just have to think about what works best in your context.
Great. And another question we have is, have you found any specific devices that have worked particularly well for using Forest Watcher?
That's a great question. So we've used a lot of different devices. It depends what's available in each country. They all have different names. But the specs that we've decided would work best, the minimum specs are 1 gigabyte of RAM, and the operating system would be an Android OS 5.0 Lollipop, with a storage of 16 gigabytes. Forest Watcher doesn't necessarily need all this space, but it's recommended for the phone or the tablet in order for it to run well with other apps. And then the recommended specs would be 2 gigabytes of RAM, Android OS operating system of 6.0 Marshmallow, and storage of 32 gigabytes. And that's just recommended. It works with the lower specs, as I mentioned, but if you want to run the app with very little issue, those would be the specs you would look for.
Another question is, the satellite imagery that shows up in the app, does that actually change to reflect new imagery?
So the answer is no. The satellite base map that we're using in Forest Watcher is from Mapbox. So it's a static base map that's a composite of a bunch of different imagery sources. And the GLAD alerts are of course being updated every 7 days when new Landsat images are available. So sometimes you'll get a situation where you'll see a forest loss alert, but the imagery underneath is older, so it may still look like that forest is intact. That doesn't necessarily mean the alert is wrong, it just means that the underlying imagery is probably from a different date. So that can be a little confusing when you're doing trainings, but just try to get the users to understand that the imagery is there to be a reference, to help navigate, but it's not necessarily showing the same date as the alerts.
I think that also brings up another clarifying point that might be useful to everyone on the call, is that the app will only download a zoom level 12. So as you zoom in closer, it may come out sort of pixelated. This was just because of the memory and space concerns. If we're downloading these really high resolution images at many zoom levels, it's going to take up a lot of space on your phone, and it will make the app run slower. So this was just a consideration we had for the first version of the app, but we are going to continue doing development in the new year. So we look forward to your feedback and how you find that useful, or if you're having issues with that.
So I think that sums up all the questions that we've gotten today. But if you think of any other questions later on, go ahead and contact us at the email that you see on your screen, forestwatcher@wi.org. And we'll also send out a follow-up email with links to the how-to portal and different tutorial resources, as well as the recording of this webinar if you want to watch it back. So thanks everyone for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.